Better late than never. That's the saying, and it could not be more apt today. We said we'd be here at 5 o'clock. Then we said we didn't know when we were going to be here. And now here we are at 8 o'clock. What's 3 hours between friends, SO Live fan base? Danny Flexen here, joined as always by Mr. Ayman Khan. We've got a lot to talk about, so don't let the late hour put you off. We're ready to go. Ayman, how are you?
Late hour or prime time? Late hour or prime time? 5, 8, 5, 8, whatever it is. We're here on a Monday with however many it is you in the chat, 84 in you right now. Let us know that you're alive on Seconds Out Live by hitting the like button. I'm great. Can't wait to bite into 2024. I'm late on the plate. I'm ready to play up now. Let's get into it.
Like, comment, subscribe, all the above. But we've got loads to talk about, as I said. And as you can see from the headline banner, we're going straight in at the top or near the top of the heavyweight division. And as you can see, it's all about the recently announced heavyweight showdown between Anthony Joshua. Still soon after his last outing against Otto Wallin. Already got another fight announced for March. But not against Deontay Wilder, as was originally planned after Joseph Parker upset the apple cart in that regard. But against former UFC champion, MMA superstar Francis Ngannou, coming off that struggle with Tyson Fury that many people felt could have gone either way. Obviously, Fury got the nod ultimately. But yeah, AJ grasping the nettle or taking the money. It depends which way you look here. Ayman, what was your first reaction to hearing that this fight had been signed?
Quite frankly, I was confused as to how this fight has come about and why Anthony Joshua specifically has gone the direction he's gone. Let's start with Francis Ngannou and say, look, for Francis, and you're going to hear this a lot as you heard the first time round when Francis fought Tyson Fury, is great for Francis. Another opportunity to earn a lot of money, another opportunity at the UFC where you don't get your money into boxing now, where you're getting paid over in Saudi Arabia. You're getting the big nights, you're getting the big fights, you're getting the big paydays. Brilliant for Francis, who's finally getting what he deserves. Great for him. Move Francis out of the equation now. Anthony Joshua and his direction in his career, on his climb back to being 3-time world champion. So nice you have to do it twice. So nice you want to do it thrice. But it's not for a title. It's not for anything that will position him towards a title. So I'm confused by that because that's been the direction that he said when Radio Raheem spoke to him and said, look, when I think about opponents I want, if it positions me for a world title, then I'm taking that. But Francis Ngannou doesn't do that. I thought Filip Hrgović would be doing that. So would we not be fighting Filip Hrgović for the belt or something along those lines? And then when I think it was maybe rewind 3 months ago when it was pitched to Eddie Hearn as to whether Anthony Joshua would be interested in a fight with Francis Ngannou when Tyson Fury was fighting Francis Ngannou, he said no, that AJ isn't interested in those type of fights. Yet here we are now. We've arrived at the destination where in March, I believe it is, that the two will be going out and fighting each other and squaring off. So delving into this and just saying out my stall, really, this seems like almost the path of maybe least resistance to building up and heating the fight between Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury versus Anthony Joshua, given the credit as the champion, without maybe facing the opponents needed to really build and heat up that fight. It's a fight that we've talked about for a long time. We wanted to see, and with fights like Joshua and Wilder falling to the wayside, we really need this one. And I think they're pushing towards that. They're pushing towards this Ngannou fight.
Yeah, it is March the 8th, we're led to believe, which is a Friday night rather than the Saturday because it's the Saudi Grand Prix, apparently, on the Saturday night. And so they don't want to clash with that. But yeah, let's look at some of your messages and I'll get into it a bit more. Rick Sutcliffe says we may be seeing AJ back on top by the end of 2024. Not sure this necessarily gets him there, though. Fred Hampton's gone out on a big one here. Says Ngannou's going to win by KO. I'm sure you'll get good odds for that, Fred. King says, is it an exhibition or a normal fight? As far as we're aware, it's a 10-round heavyweight contest. No exhibition rules. Big Dog Boxing says, now Saudi are involved more than ever. Everyone is chasing a bag, not necessarily a belt. Arnold Gergei says probably fight Hrgović when Fury rematches Usyk. And Snow says it's a 10-round fight. You know what that means. What does that mean? To enlighten us, Snow. Yeah, I mean, when I first saw the news, I wasn't entirely surprised because I think Eddie Hearn had said they were in negotiations with 3 fighters, and it's always the rule of 3. You'll notice with Eddie Hearn, you can always pick out who it's most likely to be because 2 of the names you'll always think, yeah, a bit soon for that or a bit dangerous for that, and it'll always be often the least kind of one you want to see will end up being the one it is, and we've seen that used with other fighters in the past. I'm sure Eddie Hearn's not the only promoter that does it either. But I think the 3 fighters were Hrgovic, Zhilei Zhang, and Ngannou. And it never looked likely, in my view anyway, to be Zhang, not this soon. As much as Joshua might want to do it, he's a powerful southpaw, coming off those 2 big destructive wins over Joe Joyce. Always looks a bit fanciful. Hrgovic seemed the favourite, though, because he's got the belt. But quite soon after Day of Reckoning to have another huge fight for both men. I know Hrgovic had an easier, well, on paper, easier night than AJ, although they both were pretty one-sided victors in Riyadh. So we thought maybe Hrgovic, but obviously we haven't seen that IBF belt vacated yet. We expect that to happen once Fury and Usyk get on February the 17th. And then Ngannou was always kind of lurking there as something where you knew financially it would be incredibly attractive to AJ and his team. And on the flip side of that, people always talk about, maximum risk, minimum reward for reasons why fighters get avoided. I guess Devin Haney's a more recent example of that. In the past, fighters like Andre Ward, Winky Wright, and so on, members of the Who Needs Him club. But this is kind of the opposite, maybe, in AJ and his team's view, in that, Ngannou, minimum risk, maybe. They might think that Tyson Fury underprepared, or he's getting old, or a combination of the 2 against Ngannou. Maybe that performance flattered the former UFC fighter. And certainly maximum reward because it's taking place in Riyadh, Turkey al-Sheikh, putting the bankroll behind it. And so maybe it's a keep busy fight. Someone alluded to in the chat, we know Tyson Fury and Alexander Usyk are going to be each other for at least 2 fights. So those belts, apart from which is one, will not coast for quite some time. So maybe it will be AJ and Ngannou if all goes well there, then Hrgovic, get that rematch out of the way, and maybe towards the end of the year, we'll see Joshua against the winner, which I imagine his team will be hoping is Tyson Fury, because it's already been proven twice that Usyk has the requisite skill set to get past Anthony Joshua, and it'll be a harder sell as well if it's a fight we've already seen twice with the same outcome before. So they'll be hoping Fury comes out on top, and there's obviously some doubt about that as well, which I'm sure we'll be discussing in a bit. In fact, there's probably more doubt about Fury Usyk now than there is about Joshua and Ngannou amongst boxing fans in general. We've got a poll, which we're just going to put out now, and I'll ask Ayman his view on this in a minute. But how much do you feel that Ngannou is... Let me just see how I put it to make sure I get this right. Do you give Francis Ngannou more or less of a chance of beating AJ than you gave Otto Wallin before their fight? So going into the Wallin fight, I saw quite a few people picking him, but just as many, if not more, picking AJ. What chances are you giving Ngannou in relation to that? Is he a risk, or is it all reward, as we've asked in the title? And Ayman, what do you think?
It's a bit of a difficult one to answer, really, because you're sort of going against the boxing protocol by sticking with Francis Ngannou after his performance against Tyson Fury, with Otto Wallin being the more accomplished boxer, at least of what we've seen. Well, yeah, he will be the more accomplished boxer, but with what Ngannou was able to do against Tyson Fury, really kind of have to take him for that form of performance, taken into account as well when it comes to Anthony Joshua and this new recent form, this new rebuild under the guide of the banner of Ben Davison and his team. They're really ones who look to research and find out information and really prepare their fighters for the fights with the watching of the tape. And there isn't much tape on, isn't much tape on Francis Ngannou, at least with 10-ounce gloves on. Anyway, there's only the Fury fight to go on. But I find him to be, personally, I think off of the back of Otto Wallin fight, where Wallin really didn't offer too much. It's quite a low bar to pass there, and I think Ngannou will surpass that low bar in terms of toughness. It will be a harder fight for Joshua, especially with the assets that he brings to the ring. He's the same sort of height. He's probably more, well, judging by the way Ngannou was able to impose himself on Fury. He looks the more sturdier, the more bigger, heavier fighter, the one that will be dominant in the ring in terms of his clinches, not in just terms of the clinch proficiency because of his background, but in terms of the way of the fighter who'll be more stronger in those moments, especially with the cardio that he has as well, where AJ knows he's not a 12-round fighter. He's admitted that himself. Francis Ngannou has shown that he can keep up the cardio for those later rounds as well. So I think this is going to be a tougher fighting proposition, especially as well factor in the power that he has, power that's been able to clip Tyson Fury, power that I imagine will be able to clip Anthony Joshua too if he's not on toe on the fight. So I think in prospect, this will be the tougher fight for Anthony Joshua. I will right now be picking Joshua as the favorite. I think the problem with Fury and Ngannou is Fury probably gave Ngannou, alongside maybe not taking him as the challenge that he was, maybe a little bit too much respect. And in the way that Fury fights, not exactly the combination puncher Joshua is or has been in the past. I think you'll need to find them in this fight to dispatch of Francis Ngannou. I think we could see an early finish in favor of the former unified heavyweight champion, Anthony Joshua.
So, Ian, however you pronounce it, sorry, mate, you'll have to tell us. This is going to backfire big time for Hearn. I see visions of Andy Ruiz all over again. Presumably Andy Ruiz the first time round, not after he'd eaten half of the West Coast. Snow says, after 10 rounds, this bout goes to the scorecards. He's really drip feeding us his prediction here. I'm assuming he means that there's a chance that Ngannou will get the better of the affair but not get the verdict. But I wait to see that confirmed from Snow there. The Bringer says, I want to see Rock'em Sock'em Robots, but AJ ain't crazy. He'll control the outside and get Francis on points, which wouldn't be the least sensible thing in the world. Rick Sutcliffe says, AJ beats Valiant and Ngannou in a better style than Fury. Sends a message, though, for later in the year. That's a very good point. Mr. Braggadocious says, Anthony Joshua going to smoke the hell out of this dude. He's going to get his ass. Fair enough. The Bringer, that is to say, try to get Francis on points. Yeah, we cracked your code. It's all good. Who else? Sorry, I've just gone too far up the chat there. Ian again, AJ won't be getting up from Ngannou's power. He ain't no Fury who always gets back up. Big Dot Boxing, this will be close, something like AJ Ruiz 1. Ian, Fury never quits, AJ does. Wow. Bringing out the big guns already, the quit slur. Big Dog Boxing, it could be an upset for AJ, but win or lose, he gets a bag and it won't affect his angle on moving for a belt. I mean, technically, well, I don't know, because Ngannou's got that WBC rating now, hasn't he? So if AJ were to lose to Ngannou, surely it drops him down the world rankings now. Fury set the bar so low, all AJ has to do is look better than Fury. That is a very low bar, you're quite right. Malcolm Marcel says, oh, sorry. Just give me one sec. Malcolm Marcel, is it a 2-fight deal with the Saudis? I presume he means for Joshua. I'm not sure it is. I think they might have negotiated this separately, but that's a question we should perhaps ask Eddie Hearn. DB Cooper 1 says, bad timing, lads. FA Cup's on. Everyone's watching Man United. Why would anyone want to watch Man United? The form they're in. No. Come on. Any friends you've got who might be watching Man United, drop them a text now and tell them it's a lot more entertaining here on SO Live than it is at Old Trafford, or if they're away. I have no idea who they're playing in the FA Cup this round. DB Cooper, going off Daniel Dubois' geography, they should brand this Rumble in the Jungle Africa Part 2. Yeah, I mean, to be fair, DB Cooper 1, you spelled Dubois' surname wrong. So, glass houses and all that. Coton Hamd says, that was a good matchup, Battle of the Builders. Nemo Dive Bahia Brazil says, if AJ goes for the body late on, he should get a stoppage. Roger Downs says, great fight. Luke Ponta says, there is no way AJ is going to beat Ngannou. Look at what he's done to Fury, let alone what he's going to do to AJ. Just the sheer variation, sheer variety of comments in the chat shows, how polarizing this fight is. And I guess how well it will do at the box office as well. Because you've got plenty of people out there who seem to think Ngannou's got a really good chance. And then you've got just as many who think it's a walk in the park for AJ. So I find that really interesting. It does seem to be at least partly a cash grab. When we looked at Conor Benn and Chris Eubank Jr. fighting each other, we all knew why they were doing it. They had the legacy to build on. They had an inbuilt feud, and it was going to make a hell of a lot of money, more than either would in their respective weight divisions. And I think people kind of accepted that. And I think it's similar here in that AJ can't go for Fury or Usyk at the moment. He'd be crazy to go for a Zhang with no real reward at stake. So to go for someone like Ngannou, who he will feel comfortable of getting past, and I'm sure Ben Davison, that relationship's continuing, I'm sure he'll feel confident as well. You can understand why he wants to do it. And again, it does kind of make a bit of a point to Fury. If he stops Ngannou and Fury went life and death, you can understand it. I know I saw some comments from John Fury where he was saying, neither of them are anywhere near as good as my son. People talk about how good AJ is going to do, etc., etc. But talk like that may just bite them all in the bum because, if AJ does come out firing and gets Ngannou out there in the first 1, 2, 3 rounds, because AJ is more of a textbook boxer than Tyson Fury. Tyson Fury's more unorthodox. He's got a lot more variety to his game. But in terms of a boxer, like a stand-up textbook amateur style boxer, AJ's closer to that mold than Fury. So that might be more confusing for Ngannou, if you like. But I think it is an incredibly intriguing fight. I mean, I do make AJ a big favourite, similar to Ayman. But I do understand why people are, making it closer. Like Khotan Hamid there says it's a 50-50 fight. Ian, not Owen this time, says he will knock AJ out, spark out 100%. Lady Flat Kappa says, in my opinion, Ngannou would beat AJ. Bad Mike 11, AJ wins via KO. See, every chat is a different outcome. Fury's been exposed. His best wins of fight is AJ already stopped, plus Wilder has been proven a bum. I'm not sure he's been proven a bum at the point when Fury fought him. I think Wilder was in his pomp then, and maybe he's not now. Maybe he's on decline. Maybe he was just out the ring for too long before the Parker fight. Also, Parker's performance was superb. Roger Downs still wants to see Joshua versus Fury. Don't we all, Roger? We've just got to hope they get through what's out there in the meantime. Although even if Fury were to lose to Usyk twice, and AJ were, maybe not if AJ were to lose to Ngannou, but if AJ got through Ngannou, Fury lost a couple of times to Usyk, I think you could still make that fight. I think, if you have Usyk as this tricky puzzle to put together and he's managed to get past both AJ and Fury, I still think you can make that fight between the two of them as a kind of a grudge match. But, let's wait and see. There's every chance both will get through the next fight, and it will be for, all the major belts if AJ manages to fit in Filip Hrgović in the meantime and get past him as well. But while we talked about Joshua against Ngannou, we also have been given drip-fed, if you like, given sprinkles of information about the rest of that card. Looks like they're trying to do Day of Reckoning Mark II, if anything, on March the 8th. There's been talk of Zhilei Zhang, who we mentioned earlier, appearing on the show, and also Joseph Parker. And Zhilei Zhang seems keen to fight Joseph Parker. He thinks that would be a really good fight for him at this time. Parker, I think he said something like Parker's really big right now, coming off that win over Wilder. Everyone's talking about him, so it'd be good to fight him. But then, like a day after Zhang made those comments, rumours started to circulate that they'd both be on the card, but against different opposition. There's been a lot of talk about Joe Joyce getting a shot out in Saudi Arabia. I think a lot of people want to see Daniel Dubois back after his great performance against Jarrell Miller at the original Day of Reckoning. So there's been a lot of talk about different people being on the undercard. Ayman, if you could play fantasy matchmaker for a minute, who would you like to see on the card, and who would you like to, what fights, what matchups would you like to make?
Yeah, from the names suggested there with Zhang and Parker, if the fight doesn't materialize between those two against each other in the ring, which is a good fighting prospect, you'd have to favor Zhang in the ascendancy in the way he has been, especially beating Joyce, who bettered Parker recently. If it's not Zhang and Parker, either fighter, Zhang and Parker, in against Martin Bakole is a good prospect. I know that Martin Bakole very much won the favor of the fans over in Saudi Arabia. Big hulking Martin in that new frame. I know he's now looking to shed some of those excess pounds heading into his next fight. But Martin Bakole is someone over in these shows is very much well respected, and one that we see as boxing fans as needing an opportunity. One against Zhang could materialize, one against Parker could materialize. The other fight that I'd like to see Joseph Parker in specifically, and I believe it's one that he signed for, at least originally, in the outset for his Saudi adventure. When it came to him coming on the card, he'd agreed to fight Daniel Dubois. That didn't materialize, and Dubois fought Miller, and Parker fought Wilder, obviously. Both won those fights. Stick those two in. Parker and Dubois, I think, is a real good fight there between the two fighters. Different clash of styles. One where, again, we'll see Daniel Dubois tested. One where, again, we'll see Daniel Dubois have this significant punch power over Parker. But Parker being that come forward front fighter with a lot of experience in the ring, former world champion, a real good scalp if Daniel Dubois could get it over Parker, and one that will really push him up the rankings there. So those for me are the two fights that stick out. Otherwise, Caballero seemed to really earn his opportunity. He's kind of been floating around that European level, although his backers and him himself, I believe, don't really need to take unnecessary risks because they don't really need the money. Would the fight against Zhang specifically see itself as one they'd take the risk against because of Zhang's position right now? Would they want to put themselves in that position and fight Zhang and roll the dice there? Maybe not so much for Parker, but for Zhang, I think that might be more of an entertaining prospect. So those are the ones that stick out for me specifically as fights that I'd like to see off the back of the card, on the card. Sorry. Otherwise, other heavyweights, Joyce. I don't believe Joyce is targeted for this March card. I think Joyce might be fighting domestically, at least from what I've heard. I think that's to be announced soon. I might be completely wrong there, and my wires will be crossed. But I believe Joyce isn't in the picture right now. I think that's probably the best thing to do. He's not going to fight Zhang again for the third time, although he would love to. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think Parker, that rematch there, I think Parker would probably take it, but probably want something more. As opposed to looking backwards, we're looking forwards. Dubois maybe against Joyce too, but I feel like Joyce would probably want a fight to come back to then build to that Dubois fight. That's something that needs that little bit of mix and that little build again. I think Dubois and Don Charles will probably feel the same again. Maybe another fight before those two go at it. But yeah, that's what sticks out to me at the moment right now.
Joff Barrett here says Chuck Dillian White in the mix. I'm not sure what his situation is in terms of license and so on at the moment, so we'd have to look into that. But yeah, I mean, he is missed in the heavyweight division. I was speaking to someone yesterday who was talking about Dillian White against Dubois, Dillian White against it, and going through the late, and they all sounded like entertaining fights, to be fair. Roger Down says if Wilder loses his next fight, he should retire. How about Wilder against Caballero? We talked about Caballero there. You know, dropped Makhmudov 3 times, got rid of him, looked really good in doing so, but not really his usual style. We're used to seeing him a bit more of a mover and a spoiler. So someone who could maybe frustrate Wilder, take him into the later rounds, and then it is Wilder's famed one-shot power against the perhaps more crafty skills of a Caballero. And that's a real crossroads fight. And I think if Wilder loses to someone of the perceived level, at least, of Caballero at this stage of their careers, then maybe he would consider retirement. But for Caballero, that could be a win that really launches him forward because he doesn't have the previous defeats on his record that Joseph Parker has that people kind of weigh up against that great performance versus Wilder. So maybe Caballero against Wilder, I'd quite like to see that. Good to see Caballero finally get his moment to shine after beating Derek Chisora all those many years ago. I'm sure Chisora is probably pitching to get involved in the Saudi shows. He seems to be the big man on campus over in Riyadh at the moment, but hasn't fought on the card yet during Riyadh season. So you've got to imagine he's kind of putting his name forward and if he has any little private meetings with His Excellency Turki Al Sheikh, you can imagine Derek's pitching to be involved where he can. But yeah, I think there's some good shouts in there. I think the sooner Wilder comes back, the better, because I think if inactivity was part of the reason he lost to Joseph Parker, to have a more active 2024, get straight back on the horse, if you like, it'd be good to see, unless Wilder really does have designs on just securing a bag and then disappearing from the boxing world, sailing off into the sunset. And just to remind you, we have got a poll out. We're asking if you think that Francis Ngannou is more of a risk to Anthony Joshua than Otto Wallin was. Not in light of how the fight played out with Wallin in December, but what you thought before the fight. How much chance do you give Wallin then, and how much chance do you give Ngannou now? Let us know what you think by voting in the poll. But it looks like another great event. And Riyadh season, apparently this will close out Riyadh season, which started back in October with Fury against Ngannou. But is this something, Ayman, you think we're going to see every year now, with this level of depth of fight cards?
Oh, definitely. I wonder how things move when, what is it? There's a Jeddah season, isn't there? Like towards the end of the year, I think, or at least events happen in Jeddah as well too. I know the WWE events have happened there beforehand, as have other fights. I've been to one myself. So I was there for Usyk AJ too. So I think this could run throughout the year. But yeah, Riyadh season, sort of like I don't know, literally a season for fights. Yeah, 1 or 2, 3 events yearly. Seems like this is where I think it's been discussed before by other people, but the real home for big fights is moving from Wembley to Las Vegas to all the way over to now Riyadh and Saudi Arabia because of the amount of money that's on the table there. So yeah, I think we're going to be getting a lot more of these type of nights, and just a couple of the names that came into thinking of fighters I want to see on the next card in March. Fabio Wardley. I imagine we'll see Fabio Wardley back there, maybe defending his British title, or even the British title behind him and looking to take a step forward. Another fighter who really, really needs a fight after being absent for the last years, Andy Ruiz. And throwing in Andy Ruiz back into the mix could be, a little exciting. It'll bring back to the division. Maybe Otto Wallen be a good fight for him back. Otto Wallen needing a win. Andy Ruiz not been in the ring for a long time. That sort of fight to propel him into a bit of activity to then have a big fight against a Parker who he lost to beforehand, a Wilder who they were mooted to fight last year. So bringing him back into the mix is another fight I'd like to see in this Riyadh season, of which there is much more money to come.
Now, Mr. Moon says he, meaning Ngannou, stands no chance against AJ if he couldn't stop a washed-up Fury. Few assumptions there. Ian says, let's see if Fury can beat Usyk. If he does, he will definitely fuck AJ up. Wow. Went from 0 to 60 very quickly there. Richard Heyman says, the thing with Ngannou is he keeps learning and improving. Francis is no joke, folks. Rick Sutcliffe, is there a chance Usyk beats Fury and then retires? Does that leave all the belts up for grabs? It would do, but I don't think he'll beat him once and then retire. I mean, I don't think he'll beat him at all. I'm backing Fury in the fight, but I think if he does defeat him, he will have to fight him again. I think it's a 2-fight deal with a rematch clause. So I don't think there's much room for manoeuvre there. I suppose retirement would be the only way to get out of it, but I don't see that happening. I think he'd want to do it again. He'd want to make that money again. But maybe after the rematch, whoever comes out on top could give up all the belts and sail off into the sunset. And then the next Riyadh season, who knows? It could be like a tournament. You could have vacant titles, all 4 belts, and then have the semis at the next show and the final at the last one. Who knows? Be like Don King shows from 20 years ago or more. Roger Down says Zhang versus Wilder. You must really hate Deontay Wilder, Roger. Richie Elgar says, if Francis wins, he gets Fury rematch. If AJ wins, then Francis can get the Wilder fight. I suppose Ngannou Wilder could still be made, yeah, as long as AJ doesn't completely destroy Ngannou, as long as he gives a decent account of himself. Lanky Streak of Piss says, if AJ doesn't win pretty comfortably or KO Ngannou, then is heavyweight boxing done, as the UFC community are making it a laughingstock after the Fury performance? No, not necessarily. I think Ngannou's a big, tough man with combat sports experience and a very hard punch. Physically strong. I don't think it's, in any way embarrassing. I mean, I think the Fury performance was disappointing for boxing, but I think a switched on AJ wins pretty comfortably. I don't think a failure to stop him necessarily means that boxing's done or that MMA is any way better than boxing. I think at the very top level, there is a certain amount of crossover in the striking skills department. Obviously, a boxer going to MMA would be completely different because there's so many other disciplines to involve. Like Woo Woo says, it's a paycheck for Anthony. That's simple. The Bringer says Parker almost knocked Wilder out, in caps. Leo Cullinane says, look at Ngannou's chin in UFC. Never once looked like getting KO'd, and some of the best chins ever in combat sport usually get knocked out once or twice in UFC after 17 to 18 fights. Tough fight for AJ. Pretty much what I just said, yeah. Tough, big man. I don't think not knocking him out is a slur on AJ or on heavyweight boxing. iBoxing Hub is saying hit the like button. people, which we always appreciate. I don't know where Thunder Road is, probably a bit late for him, past his bedtime. King Dale Clark, get a real job instead of sitting on your backside worshipping boxers, mug. Well, you didn't specify Dale. I'm sure I banned you before, whether you were talking to me or Ayman there, but I'll take that one on the chin. We'll have to work harder on banning you. But yeah, appreciate you on this Monday evening. Roger Downs, I like Wilder, but no effort against Parker. Yeah, I mean, it was a tricky one from Wilder because he'd come back after so long and he was probably ready for a 1, 2, 3 round blowout as it's become the norm, and was dragged into a bit of a dogfight, a bit of a war, and maybe just didn't have the gas in the tank or the preparation, not necessarily physically, but maybe mentally as well, to get into that sort of fight, given how long he'd been out of the ring. Or maybe he is, past his prime now and the Fury fights took a lot out of him. We won't know until he has one more fight, I don't think. But while Joshua has moved on from December 23rd to fight Ngannou, and we might see some of the other heavyweights, as we've talked about on that card in March, Jarrell Big Baby Miller, who was a feature of the build-up to the Day of Reckoning and, delivered to an extent in the ring against Daniel Dubois. He didn't win, but he made the fight competitive and pushed Dubois to come through an acid test. He's in jail. He's still in jail. We were talking about this just before we came on air. He got arrested last week for assault and was it carjacking? I don't know if that's the actual name for the offence, but it's certainly what's alleged to have happened. There was a female friend apparently of Miller came to get her cell phone out of a car that had been repossessed. And I think the guy who worked at the dealership, Hames dealership in Hollywood, Florida, was going to got the keys to get the cell phone out of the car and was attacked and put in a chokehold, allegedly, by Jarrell Big Baby Miller, who then took the keys and the car and disappeared. But their car had a tracking device, which he obviously didn't account for. And he was quickly found and apprehended. I wouldn't have liked to be any of those police officers trying to apprehend Jarrell Miller, although I'm sure the fact that American policemen carry firearms didn't hurt. But yeah, so he's apparently in jail with a bond set, but as far as we're aware, not yet posted. And he put out a message on social media either yesterday or the day before, protesting his innocence. Ayman, I know he's a controversial guy with a very interesting backstory, but were you surprised? And if so, how much by this latest development?
I was somewhat surprised, to be honest with you. Really, like I thought maybe Jarrell had put some of the negative sides to him in his past, what with his newfound focus, specifically religious focus, which he found over in Saudi Arabia. To see the news, to hear the news of Jarrell and what's happened recently was, I don't know, it came out, of course, out of left field. I wasn't really kind of thinking, oh, this is very much in tune with Jarrell. I know that the issues regarding drug taking, and you can say that points to shortcuts in your character and such. And you can probably make that claim with some form of credibility. But I like to kind of position that and box that into sports and not really lead that into outside life. I believe, though, that Jarrell does have a bit of coming from where Jarrell does come from. He has had a past where these sort of things wouldn't be unfamiliar to him. Not saying that he did these all too frequently, but I'm sure he will come across situations where he's seen this sort of thing happen around him or in circles that he'd been in. There has been a recent update from Jarrell. I'll read that out quickly. He says, "God is good. God is great. First and foremost, thank you sincerely to my family, team, friends, and countless supporters from around the world who have relentlessly lifted me in prayer since this unfortunate ordeal began. God gives the toughest battles to his strongest soldiers." Also extending a very special thanks to our trailblazing attorney, John Weeks, who says, "After the facts are revealed, we're all confident he will be vindicated. I'm prayerful and look forward to a favorable resolution of this case." And that's the other side to the equation. Whilst it doesn't sound great on the surface of the details that we've been given, they're very confident, or at least his lawyer is very confident, that once everything's put out there and that someone has presided over it, that Jarrell Miller will be released of the sanctions that are currently imposed over him. It was a bit of a dig as well from the people who originally reported the news, calling him former boxer. There, I wonder what that was about. Maybe they know something that we don't. But yeah, Jarrell very much active.
Yeah, what's the Dubois fight?
Yeah, that was what it was.
Right, Jarrell, when you get out.
But look, in terms of Jarrell, whatever the details of the case, whatever is coming to him will come to him, whether it's a sentence or freedom from this and moving on from it. But in terms of the boxing sense specifically, look, he provided excitement, whether he delivered on the night or not, or whether he got the win or not. He provided excitement and was that little bit of a lightning rod to stir the pot between different fighters who had different stories and has stories with different fighters across the heavyweight division. So he's an exciting reintroduction into the heavyweight scene, and from that sporting sense, from that boxing sense, he will be missed if he's not going to be active. But he has to clear up the stuff. You can't keep shooting yourself in the foot, which seemingly in this case seems to be a current theme with Jarrell. If he wants to move forward and if he wants to create those opportunities to get more of the money that he's seeking to better his life, he can't not help himself in bettering his life.
Yeah, iBoxing Hub says Jarrell Miller's reported to have made about £3 million fighting Dubois. So what reason would he have to be carjacking? But not only that, why is he still in prison on a bond? Because I can't remember how much it was, but it was certainly less than £3 million. And it doesn't look like he's been bailed out yet. So maybe that money hasn't cleared yet. Dale Clark's come up with another account now because I banned him on the first one. Now he's taking aim at LGBT, I think. I think he needs a lie down, Dale. Go and sit on a naughty step for a bit. The Bringer says, I've seen successful Brooklynites jack cars. Didier Drug Dealer says, Jarrell Barrel of Drugs Miller. I mean, you could talk with a handle like that. Yeah, and there's other insults after that, I think. Yeah, I mean, it's easy for us to sit back and kind of have a bit of a chuckle at it. I think that it was similar when Bomac got arrested in Manchester, and he's been released since, of course, and didn't seem to have any real kind of grievance against the UK after that. So maybe he was treated well by our penal system. But yeah, Jarrell Miller seemed to be in a better place over the last couple of years since those drug bans. Tested around the clock by VADA. I've interviewed him a couple of times since then. I think Ayman, you have as well. And, you know, seems like quite a level-headed guy. And everyone you speak to in the boxing community says, yeah, I know what he's done in the past, etc. But he's a really good guy. He's really, I know what he's like in the cameras, but away from that, he's not. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. The details regarding the incident are sketchy, to say the least, as I'm sure are some of the people involved. But, if there was a friend who had their cell phone in the car, you've got to think that there's some connection with Miller and the car itself, or the female friend in the car. Maybe it was repossessed from them. I'd never make a detective with this slow deliberation, but it's a personal matter, I think. So I don't think it was driven by money. I don't think he's stolen the car because he's short of a few bob. I think it's, there's a personal issue at stake, and maybe he's flipped, or, but this is all allegedly anyway. He says he didn't do it, although if he was caught in a car that wasn't his own, miles away from the dealership by a policeman, it's going to be a very interesting one. It's going to challenge, a Harry Houdini level escapologist to get out of this one. But if anyone could do it, he's always been resourceful, Jarrell Miller, if nothing else. So let's wait and see how that one pans out. iBoxing Hub says, do you guys let fans come on the show? We're a boxing channel from the UK inspired by you guys. We would love to collab with you. Was it DM for collabs? That's what I see on other people's profiles. Yeah, I mean, we haven't done so far, but that's not to say we wouldn't. Obviously, there's an inherent risk in letting people you don't know onto live broadcasting. But yeah, let's talk further offline. Roger Downs, I like the UK fighters. Chisora, Hay, Price, of course, AJ and Tyson. Yeah, all good guys, provided countless amounts of entertainment. iBoxing Hub, Miller is a really nice person off camera. We spoke to him in Saudi. He is really humble. Andrew says, not a fan of AJ is Flexen, it seems, anyway. No, not that at all. I mean, I'm not a fan necessarily of any boxer because I work in the, periphery of the industry. But I think AJ's a good fighter. I think he's done wonders for British boxing and helped bring it back from arenas to stadia alongside Eddie Hearn. I think coming out of the Olympics, he made a huge splash, winning the final gold medal for Britain of the Games. And then moving on to, blaze to a professional world title very, very quickly. And whenever I've had dealings with him in terms of interviews and things like that, he's always been more than amenable. You know, lovely guy, great ambassador for the sport. I feel he's been unjustly criticised for some of his behaviour outside of the sport as well. So yeah, I wouldn't say I'm not a fan, but I try to be as practical and critical, if you like, when looking at fighters, and that includes Fury. I know a lot of people think, oh, because I've known Fury for a long time and we've been kind of close in terms of a journalist-boxer relationship, that means I'm biased or whatever, and I'll take that on the chin. But I don't think that's the case at all. I think with AJ, I certainly don't know him as well as I used to know Fury, but I do think he's a great fighter. I do also feel, though, that he might be going towards he's certainly closer to the end of his career than the beginning, and just how much he has left to achieve at the very top level of heavyweight boxing is very much open to debate. But to give him his due, I really rated Otto Wallin and still do. I don't think it was his finest hour at the day of reckoning, but I'm not going to say how good and talented and strong I feel Wallin is, and then AJ destroys him in a one-sided fight and suddenly decide AJ's got nothing left to give. That wouldn't make any logical sense. So AJ certainly impressed me day of reckoning, but this isn't the next move I would have liked to have seen from him, because obviously Francis Ngannou, it's another fight like Wallin where he's expected by the vast majority to win. And if AJ is going to aim for the likes of Fury, Usyk again perhaps, or even Hrgovic, you'd like to see him at least tested on the way there, especially in the second fight with a relatively new relationship with trainer Ben Davison. Andrew now says, people criticising AJ for fighting Ngannou, but for Fury as a champion, it's okay. Clowns. I think there is a distinction there. One, Fury was criticised widely for fighting Ngannou in the first place. Especially the fact that he didn't defend his title in the whole calendar year 2023. He was absolutely, rampaged by loads of people. So I don't think that's necessarily the case. But also, we know more about Ngannou now. So I think he's regarded as a bigger threat than he was then. So that's a plus on AJ's side. But I think everyone got really excited about AJ against Wallin, how well he did, how good he looked. It was a return for many people to the marauding, fast, powerful combination puncher of old. And so to follow that up with an Ngannou fight does seem like a bit of a disappointment, especially when you've got his promoter talking about a possibility of Hrgovic next, Zhang next. And then it turns out to be Ngannou, who, hardcore boxing fans like we are, and I imagine most of you guys are, would probably prefer Hrgovic or Zhang. But yeah, that's just my opinion. So that's Jarrell Miller. That segment was about him, and we hope he's doing all right in there, guilty or innocent. We don't like to see anyone suffering unless there's really good reason to, and that's yet to be proven. But just before we go, we still got a little bit of time left, so we want to talk about the weekend's action. We saw a long-awaited return to the ring from Virgil Ortiz Jr., who seemed very disappointed from a first-round stoppage win, more disappointed than fighters usually are when they get that sort of result at the weekend. And we also saw a British fighter in Ohara, Davies, with his long-awaited world title shot against the ageless Ismael Barroso, sadly come up short. Ayman, what did you make of the weekend's results?
Yeah, I mean, two of the big takeaways from the fights one of the big takeaways for the fight isn't actually to do with this fight specifically in terms of the actual in-ring action, or at least maybe indirectly, is Tony Weeks coming out. I think after a lot of criticism he got for last year's early stoppage that he saw or guided towards, this was claimed as another early stoppage in Virgil Ortiz being on the front foot against Lawson. And Lawson didn't look too damaged in there, but then it's been, at least from Tony Weeks's point of view, saying on Facebook that Lawson had failed at least one brain scan, had an aneurysm in there, and then eventually was cleared to box. So that was in Tony Weeks's mind when it came to officiating the fight and calling the stoppage off early, which begs a lot of questions after that, which we won't get to really post towards Tony Weeks or the commission, really. So really a situation that if we get any details outcoming from it, it's going to be drip fed, and ones that want to be fed out to us to keep at least one party looking good, because no one wants to be labeled to have not looked after the fighter's health as the first and foremost heading into the fight there. So that's a interesting takeaway from that fight. In terms of the actual action, Ortiz looked great at the new weight, and it's good to see him back and shaking off the effects of rhabdomyosis. Whether that creeps in again throughout his career is another thing, and hopefully it doesn't.
Already talking about fighting Tim Tszyu as well.
Yeah, real good. Look, it was great to see him on Twitter, and Tszyu put it out there, and Virgil Ortiz said, "Yeah, look, I'm up for it," and that's what you're hoping for from this new generation coming through now when they're getting their opportunities. You saw it with Ryan Garcia and Gervonta Davis. They fought, and that's great. Not past their peaks or anything like that. They fought now. Maybe Tszyu and Ortiz will do the same thing. So there's hope in the future for those two fighters to come forward and have that fight. When it comes to Ohara Davis, disappointing end for Ohara Davis, who should really have fought a lot better and not got caught in that fight. I thought he showed quite a little bit of inexperience in that fight as a fighter who's had a lot of belts, a lot of fights under his belt there to get up. So one, to get caught like that, and then two, to get up so quickly as well, not to want to be waved off. He had the opportunity to take his time, take the count and get up. And then the second time around, he wanted to vault himself up and really show that he was ready to go and capable of going. And the referee made the right call for it, which is a real shame. On his night, when it was his night and when he got signed to Golden Boy, that's a real big missed and faltered opportunity for Ohara. And Ohara's kind of, I think at least he's sort of made the right conclusions from it. I saw on Twitter he said that I'm not interested in rebuilding. If I'm not in with the best, then I don't want to be a stepping stone for the next generation. He wants the likes of Ramirez, Regis Prograis, and he's ready to come back at this level in May. That's a good sign from Ohara Davis, kind of knowing where he is in his career and in the division right now. Whether he gets those fights is another thing. Whether Golden Boy keep him on is another thing. There must be contracted to at least one more fight there. So, but will he be that interesting prospect to them, or will they just let him go? We'll have to wait to see what happens with Ohara. But not the crown, not the night it should have been really for Davis against Barroso. But a real good story for Barroso, who the cliche is the last thing to go is your power, and boy, did he still have it in the pocket.
Yeah, I mean, I was speaking to Lewis Hart, who we both know works for Boxing Social, the night before the fight, and said Ohara Davis will never get a more winnable world title shot than this. And that's no disrespect to Barroso, but given how late he is in his career, the fact that the frailties we've seen in previous defeats was still evident against Rody Romero, although the stoppage was obviously bullshit. And it just seemed like, Ohara had signed with Golden Boy, he was being built up, even though he was going to the States for the fight, he still seemed to be favoured by a lot of people. And it just felt like the momentum was with him in his career. He had those previous defeats to Josh Taylor, but rebounded from that. And then Jack Catterall in what was a pretty tedious affair for both fighters there. And rebuilt to the point of, a mandatory shot at a genuine world title. And against someone who a lot of impartial observers were picking him to defeat. And it's just incredibly disappointing for him and for his team that he's gone out there and, as you said, elements of inexperience there, walked into a firefight well too early in the fight, didn't kind of work his way into it and warm up. And just like that, it's all over. And, maybe if the fight had gone longer and he hadn't avoided that nightmare first round, he could have fought his way into it and got the job done. But now we'll never know. And he's got a lot to prove because just signed with Golden Boy, they're going to be queuing up to fight him now. And as he said, he wants to fight the big names and he's still happy to do that. But you've got to look at it from their point of view and say, while the young contenders will be queuing up to fight him, will the big names want to? Because he's still a dangerous fighter. And what can they prove by beating him? They're not going to beat him any quicker than Barroso did. And even if they do, they're not comparing themselves to Barroso, the likes of Regis Prograis. They consider themselves some of the very top world fighters at 140 pounds. So I think the problem Ohara's got is he doesn't want to be a gatekeeper for the up-and-comers who are looking to make their reputation off his back. But they're the sort of fighters that are going to want to fight him now. So he's going to have to hope that the power and influence afforded by his new promoter in Golden Boy gets him a fight where he's got at least as much to win as he has, or as much to gain as he has to lose. But yeah, we obviously wish him all the best. Someone said, "Oh, that's it. iBoxing Hub. Tszyu beats Ortiz in a competitive beatdown where Virgil looks good at times but loses a fight that doesn't quite get to war level. I'm not sure how big a 154 Virgil Ortiz is, and Tim Tszyu looks like an absolute threshing machine at the moment. So I'm not sure I'd be wanting to drop straight in for a one-round blowout, however you feel about the performance of the opponent, to a Tim Tszyu fight straight away. But yeah, iBoxing Hub adds, as for Ohara Davies, I'm gutted for him. He didn't just make one error. He made the same error earlier and got away with it. Ant McQueen says, tough to say as far as Tszyu and Ortiz are concerned. From what I've seen from them both, Ortiz has the edge fundamentally. Tszyu has improved and is the true 154-pounder. Intriguing matchup. Listen, if Tszyu's not going to fight Charlo, Jamel Charlo, of course, then I'm happy to see him fight any of the other top names, either at 154 or just moved up to 54. He's never in a dull fight, and he is a rising star. And I imagine he's absolute box office in Australia as well, in the same way some of the Japanese fighters are in their country. And I think Joseph Parker has been in the past in New Zealand and so on. So, yeah, want to see him back in the ring as soon as possible. And if it's against another aggressive fighter, all the better. But yeah, really appreciate you all tuning in at the later time of 8 o'clock. We'll hopefully be back to our normal 5 o'clock slot next week. I don't expect it to get cancelled, but you never know how these things work in the YouTube world. But yeah, really appreciate it. Please, if you haven't already, give us a like, a subscribe if you're not already a subscriber. And if you're watching this on playback, please leave your comments below, because sadly you've missed out on the vibe of the live chat. But there's always next week for that. And Ayman, as is customary, you get the final comments.
Final comments. I'll leave that to good luck to Callum Smith over in Canada, taking on Artur Beterbiev. No small feat there in dethroning one of the pound-for-pound kings in Artur Beterbiev. Callum has a tough task on his hands. Can he do it? A lot of people have been saying that they've seen the flaws in Artur Beterbiev in his age, in the fight with Yard. Now's the time to pick him off. With Callum Smith's punch power, he might be the man to do it. I'm not so certain he can, but if he can, he's setting himself up some real big fights in the future and a real big upset to start off the year with a bang there if Callum can go over to Canada and dethrone Artur Beterbiev. So looking forward to that fight. We'll be keeping you abreast of everything over here in the UK and further. So make sure you tuned into Seconds Out. Should be have some real big interviews, especially concerning Anthony Joshua and Francis Ngannou, that fight coming this week. So again, if you haven't already, hit the like button, subscribe. We'll see you guys on the next one.